welcome to the Virtual Memories Show. I'm your host, Gil Roth, and we're here to preserve and promote culture in this benighted age, one weekly conversation at a time. You can subscribe to the Virtual Memories Show through iTunes or by plugging our RSS feed into your favorite podcatcher. You can find the RSS feed on our websites, vmspod.com or chimeraobscura.com/VM. We're also on Twitter and Instagram at VMSPod, at virtualmemoriespodcast.tumblr.com, and on Spotify, YouTube, and TuneIn.com by searching for Virtual Memories Show. And you can visit patreon.com/VMSPod or paypal.me/VMSPod to make a one-time or recurring contribution and help me continue to produce smart conversation about books, art, comics, and culture every week at the Virtual Memories Show. Not a ton going on right now, nothing big in the week ahead, which is nice for me. I bailed on running a 5K race on Sunday evening since I'm trying to keep people up with my running habit. My hip has been barking at me since the previous weekend's race, where I set a personal record, and I decided to give it a few days off rather than risk doing real damage to it since I'm closing in on 50 and real damage is an option. That said, I did run 19 miles on that hip over the course of the past week, so it took me a few days to realize, A, it wasn't going to fix itself, and B, damage is a real option. Also, I just don't know about evening races. The guys I run with, this is the last one they're going to run for a couple of months, but it started at 6 o'clock at night on a Sunday, and I just have no idea how I would do in that sort of thing because I'm accustomed to morning runs on a light stomach. So anyway, we're going to take a couple of days off, maybe half a week to a week, see if the hip is any better next time I try and run. The other update from last week is about my old man's heart procedure. It went fine. He was discharged the next day, feels a lot better than he did before he went in, which was pretty much what they were anticipating. That said, I may have hurt my hip more from standing around in the hospital over Tuesday and Wednesday than I did from the running, but neither here nor there. We're glad that the whole procedure went according to plan. And on the reading front, I finished The Sheltering Sky this weekend, and now it's back to books for upcoming guests, like Christopher Brown's soon-to-be-published Rule of Capture, which is fantastic, and Kate Maruyama's Harrogate from about 2013 or so. Also, I kind of went bananas this past week about booking new guests because I was sort of ahead of things for about a month, and I have things for later in the summer, but there was sort of a gap, and I kind of pushed every lever I had, and now they're starting to respond, and that might turn into some really interesting guests to share with you guys soon. Sort of like this week's guest. When I recorded with the animation genius and producer J.J. Settlemeyer about a year, 14 months ago, he showed me a coffee table book about the artist Barbara Nessim. And he said, "You've got to do a podcast with Barbara. She's fantastic." I didn't know her work. The cover featured this sort of pop art Wonder Woman outline, kind of simplistic, but really transfixing drawing. The back cover was this kind of strange collage of womanhood or femininity. I don't really know how to describe it, which is something we're going to get into in this conversation. But I wrote down her name. I took a pic of the book. JJ explained Barbara was a pioneer in computer art, but also had a huge and influential career outside of the computer stuff. And they worked together on an animation project a while back, which is why he knew her and had the book on hand. So anyway, I picked up a copy of that book, which is Barbara Nessim, An Artful Life from Abrams, and discovered this amazing body of work spanning like 6 decades, starting in 1960. Again, this is going to be the part where I have difficulty explaining what's so great about her work, because Barbara's art and her illustration cover a really wide gamut. If you read the essays and look at the reproductions in An Artful Life, it can be dizzying because she's done so much and never settled into like a mode, a particular, thing throughout the years. I mean, you could say it's all about the line or all about her use of color, but it's so much more than that. She did this sort of key work in the pop art era, including that cover drawing that I was just mentioning. That was part of her Woman Girl series. And you could kind of say that's representative of her work, but she veered into being that aforementioned pioneer of computer art in the early 1980s and working in collage and doing doing these covers and illustrations over the years. And there are so many different stages of her work that are unified by that touch, I guess. But you can't just say, oh, this is, Barbara being Barbara. So yeah, there are a lot of really amazing body of work. And if you read An Artful Life, you'll see essays from people like Stephen Heller and Milton Glaser and Gloria Steinem that show that it's not just Barbara's art that stayed vibrant and energetic and ever-changing all those years. It's also reflective of her life and her personality, as I hope you're going to get from listening to our conversation. Now, in the show notes for the episode, I will include links to her work, as well as a couple of pictures, because you really have to see the breadth of this stuff to understand just how productive and influential Barbara's been, both as an artist and as a teacher, which we also get into. So after JJ connected us, it took us a little while to set up a podcast session, but here we are. Barbara hosted me at her studio, which is an amazing space in Lower Manhattan overlooking the Hudson. Before we recorded, she showed me a sort of floating pull-out gallery of her work over the years. I'm not describing that well, but again, there'll be pictures, as well as her office and her studio space and the sketchbooks that she's been keeping for decades now. It was a pretty remarkable tour, and it's somebody who clearly gets the importance of the continuity of her work and, sort of being able to archive it and have it all at hand, I suppose. And she gave me a really nice gift at the end of our afternoon, which I will tell you about at the end of the episode. We actually spent a chunk of time talking that day, both before and after the session, about art and life and work and our mutual acquaintances. And we've kept up a nice correspondence since. I will say Barbara Nessim appears to be one of the happiest artists I have ever met. And I mean that in a really good way. She's someone who does not appear to agonize over things. You'll get that as we start talking. Anyway, there are some caveats. One, we did not discuss the Woman Girl series or the roles of femininity and feminism in Barbara's work, which are important, as is the fact that she and Gloria Steinem were roommates for a bunch of years back in the 60s, and they've stayed pals since. I'm kind of bummed that I didn't bring that stuff up, but if you go to Barbara's website, barbaranessim.com, I'll give you the spelling for it later, you can find a great recent conversation between her and Ms. Steinem. My thing is, we didn't have that much time, and I was ultimately afraid that I wasn't exactly qualified to talk about feminism with Barbara, that my vocabulary for this is limited, and the stereotypes and ways I would have sort of pigeonholed her perspective, I think just would have been wrong. So I think her work speaks for itself. And if you, again, check out that video of her and Gloria Steinem, you'll get a lot of that conversation. Maybe if we get together again, I'll bring it up. We'll see. Also, other caveat, at 80, her hearing isn't phenomenal, so I enunciated a little more than I usually do. Oh, and the room was a little echoey and the air conditioning kicked on a few times, so I had to filter that stuff out. Now, here's Barbara's bio from illustrationhistory.org. It's kind of long, but I can't find a briefer one that covers all the salient points. A vital contributor and influential visionary in the world of art, Barbara Nessim has always been original in her thinking and unprecedented in her creativity. Inspired by her mother, a clothing designer, Barbara financed her studies at Pratt Institute by working as a freelance fashion illustrator, designing everything from shoes and apparel to textiles. Recognized for her fresh approach to image making, Nessim was among the few female freelance illustrators of her time. In 1980, she embraced innovation and began using the computer to create published and personal imagery. Never short of inspiration, she attributes the ongoing creativity in her work to her fine training as an artist and relies almost solely upon her sketchbooks to generate new ideas. Her passion for her work and desire to bring more to her art set the stage for what would become a long and illustrious career that has inspired many others along the way. Her illustrations have appeared in our nation's most prominent periodicals, from the New York Times to Rolling Stone, and her paintings and drawings have graced the walls of prominent museums and galleries around the globe, including the Smithsonian Institution, the Victoria and Albert Museum, and the Louvre, among others. She has also shared her gifts in the classroom as a mentor of aspiring artists at the School of Visual Arts and at Parsons New School for Design, where she served as chair of the illustration department from 1992 to 2004. Today, she focuses on the creation of large-scale works for public buildings and continues to create personal art for exhibition in New York City and beyond. And now, the Virtual Memories Conversation with Barbara Nessim. I was reading An Artful Life and thinking about the retrospective collection that went into it. What was it like for you organizing your work for a major showing like that, for a retrospective?
Well, I have to say that I was very lucky.
Yeah.
Because I have a friend who's a curator. He's the senior curator of Word and Image at the V&A, the Victoria and Albert Museum. Mm-hmm. And he came and stayed here for a week. And he did it all. He organized everything. He looked through all the drawers. I didn't really have that much to do with it. Yeah. And I was so glad, because I don't know whether I would have selected the things that he selected, or I don't know whether I would have had the insight that he had about the work. And that was great, because I didn't do anything except the work. And he was the curator and assembled everything. Mm. And then from there, the book, the Artful Life book, happened at the same time.
What was it like seeing everything? And I know you're surrounded by your work here in the studio, but seeing it in that collection.
It was amazing.
And was there a degree of insight, when you mentioned not having insight that he may have had into your work, did you see your own stuff differently, the way it was?
Well, what I did see was what other people were interested in.
Yeah.
And not what I would be interested in. I don't think I'd be able to really curate a show of my own work, because I like that, and I think that looks good, and I think it'd be really difficult for me. So I love when a curator comes in and really takes over. Yeah. And most of them say that they love working with me because I don't have a big mouth.
She lets us do our job.
Right.
It's
I don't
great.
say, oh, you must put this in, or you must. I go, oh, that's good. Yeah. Oh, I like that.
Yeah. What was the reaction like when you saw people in the museum looking at it?
At the Victoria and Albert?
Yeah.
Well, it was the biggest thrill I could ever have. I would never think that my work would be in the Victoria and Albert Museum. And when I first met Douglas Dodds, I had a friend, Patrick Prince, and she said, oh, you're going to England. You must meet Douglas Dodds at the V&A. He has some work he has work of yours in the collection. I said, really? She goes, yes, I gave all my work to the V&A, Word and Image Department, and your work was in it, like those tiny little books I have and things that I had given her over the years, because she was the curator for SIGGRAPH, which is Special Interest Group for Computer Graphics, SIG-GRAPH, and that's how I met her. And so over the years, like 20 years or whatever, she had collected some of my work, and then she gave all her work to the V&A. So I had no idea my work was in the V&A. So when I went to London, I looked him up. We had lunch, and he was very happy to meet me. I was very happy to meet him. And I don't know, I said to him, maybe you have some ideas of where I could show my work in England, because I was traveling around. And he goes, oh, he said, I would love to show your work. but we don't do solo shows at the V&A. And I said, oh, really? And I said, but even that you said that you would love to see show my work was like an amazing thing to me. So time passed. I didn't think anything of it. And he calls me up and he goes, I've been thinking about it. And since the V&A doesn't do solo shows, the only way we could do a solo show is if you would donate your work to the V&A, and then we could show something in our collection of your work, and then we could have a solo show. I thought, what part don't I get here? I'm going to have a show in the V&A, and they'll have my work, and they'll have it in their collection. Oh, my God.
And I'll have more space in my studio? I'm sorry.
Yes. And I thought, I think I died and went to heaven. I said, yes, I would love to do that. I mean, it would be my wildest dream. And that's how the show came about. I would never have thought that they would be interested in my work. Mm-hmm. And they have 80 works of mine in their permanent collection. And that is my biggest gift. Not so much I even have the show, but the fact that they have work from 1960 up until 2013, or 2012 when the show was. Hmm. But that, I would say, is the gift.
Did you feel that you were getting your due, in a sense? Did you feel it was overdue to have a major show of your work? I know you don't want to have the ego thing.
No, it's not even an ego thing. Yeah. No. Okay. It's not even an ego thing.
It's like the Wayne White line about I'll get the respect I so greatly deserve for my genius, that sort of thing.
No, it's just like I just do my work. If people really like it, I mean, I'm thrilled that I could make a living as an artist. Mm-hmm. I'm thrilled that I was able to take my art and kind of mold it into being an illustrator, because basically I'm an artist who is an illustrator, who tries very hard to be an illustrator, or was doing illustration. Yeah. And the fact that I could even make that transition was an incredible epiphany to me, because every time I would bring my portfolio around in the early 60s, to art directors, and there weren't that many women illustrators. Who knew? I read it 10, 20 years later in a book that there were only 4 women illustrators during that early time in 1960. I couldn't imagine a more fulfilling life as being an illustrator, being an artist, and having people recognize and like my work for what it is, because it's unique. It doesn't look like anybody else's work, and that other people appreciate it was a great pleasure for me.
When did you, reading some of your old interviews, you talk about that tension about being defined as an illustrator versus a quote-unquote fine artist. When did you get at ease with what your work is and who you are, I guess, as an artist? Was there a sense that you just, were the labels meant something?
No, I didn't care about labels. Yeah. No, I never cared about labels. I just cared about doing my work. But the fact that people recognize that I could do illustration and do fine art at the same time was really good for me.
Yeah. Was there permission, I guess, to do that? Was illustration, fenced off from fine art? Did you ever feel that was a border?
No, never. Yeah. Never, because when I was doing illustration, I never wanted to become I didn't want to be called a fine artist, because I learned in school that fine artists starved and suffered. Yeah. Starving and suffering is not in my DNA. Did not want to starve and suffer. So if anybody told me, oh, you're really a fine artist, I don't know whether when I would show my portfolio, because even though I tried hard to show illustration and show it in a way that looked like what my idea was of illustration, and when they said that, I was like, I don't want to hear that in my head. Mm-hmm. I didn't tell them that, but I don't want to hear that. I'm an illustrator. I want to make my living as an illustrator. I'm not a fine artist. So basically, I just fell into being an illustrator and also doing work for myself. So I had those two things going for me from the very beginning. I would do one for them and 6 for myself. One for them and 6 for myself. But my fine art always informed my illustration.
Yeah, can you elaborate on that? Can you talk a little about the bleed?
Well, if I got a job, mostly I did jobs for girly magazines. They were magazines, very tame magazines that basically exploited women.
It was the 60s.
It was the 60s, and I was happy to do it. And I was happy that they used my illustration. They never told me what to do. The stories were very interesting, except that you had these very delicate female people being photographed for these magazines. But a lot of artists, like Robert Andrew Parker worked for them. A lot of artists worked for them as well. Like you said, all the illustrators knew each other. We all knew each other, and we'd all help each other get work and introduce each other to different magazines.
Yeah, how did the market change over the years for you with illustration? I mean, you were there from a sort of golden age.
No, I was after the golden age. Yeah, the golden age, I think, was when Norman Rockwell.
Sure.
The real illustrators of the time. By the time I got into illustration, it was 1960, and it was going into another direction, like kind of my direction. Some of the little quirky, a little personal, and the 50s illustrations, boy-girl situation, illustrate this line or this little paragraph of the story, was kind of fading away.
Yeah, so you had more freedom to...
Yeah, but for the girly magazines, because what the art directors would say, anybody who reads this magazine doesn't care what the illustrations are, so you do whatever you want to do. And that gave us a lot of freedom. And every illustration, I got $100.
Very nice.
Hey, my rent was $62.50. My one room that I shared.
Yeah. Yeah, how did it evolve into the 70s and 80s? How did illustration change for you? Or the magazine markets, I guess?
Into the 70s? Well, it just never really changed for me.
Yeah.
It was basically one thing led to another, led to another, led to another. And in the 70s is when Ms. Magazine happened. Mm-hmm. And Ms. Magazine started around 1972. And that was great because I had more opportunity to do more illustration about women's issues. Because
and you could balance out your karma from doing illustrations for girly magazines. So that this way you feel like
by the 70s I didn't do illustrations for girly magazines
this way
anymore.
you were purging your past. And
but no, I didn't care. I loved doing it. It didn't have anything, I didn't have any moral thing against it. I just wanted to be an artist. Yeah. And I wanted to be able to make a living as an artist. Yeah. So the 70s came along, Ms. Magazine came along, and other magazines, like women's service magazines, were using women artists and all artists to illustrate stories. But I never got that much work. I got enough work, and the work that I got was always noticed because it was so different. And I would always be in the Society of Illustrators shows, and people would recognize it, and I think that I influenced people with what I was doing, other artists.
And you did feel that sense of camaraderie with the other illustrators?
Yeah. I really loved knowing illustrators and being friends with them, and we all helped each other, especially in the beginning. Mm-hmm. We all kind of, we wanted everybody to succeed. At least I did. Yeah. I don't feel jealousy with other people. I always wanted everyone to succeed and be happy and do good things.
Yeah. Yeah, there are occasional stories I hear from some of your peers of, the various jealousies and ripped off styles that one guy is mad about somebody else. And I'm glad you don't have any of those things bottled up.
Well, if anybody kind of was influenced by my style and they made it a little bit more commercial, that made it better for me because I tried really hard to be commercial, and people would look at my work and think, oh, I could see how I could use her in this illustration because of so-and-so doing this illustration that was kind of like a little bit influenced from my work.
Do you remember a first instance like that where you looked at something and thought, that looks a lot like my stuff? You don't have to name names or anything, but do you remember that first instance?
But I wasn't upset by it.
Yeah, not upset, but just that first moment of, wow, people are looking at my work.
That made me feel validated in a way, because like I was having an influence on a generation of illustrators where I like, oh, I can see that. I could see that I'm having an influence on other people. I would never think that in the beginning. Yeah.
Matt Groening, the guy who made The Simpsons show, had the line that copyright infringement is the sincerest form of flattery, basically from the amount of ripped off Simpsons gear that was out there. Right. But yeah, I could imagine when you see something like your work that, there's a weird sense of pride that it's... Well,
it makes me understand that my work is really valuable because people want to be me. And there's only one of me, and I'm it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. How do you feel your work's evolved since, again, from 60 to 2019? That's a long time.
It's only like about, what is it, 60 years?
Yeah, almost 60.
Only 60
Longer
years.
than I've been on this planet. So, like when you looked at it at the retrospective, what did you see evolving with your work, or what did you felt you got better at?
Well, one of the things that I think is interesting about what I do is that I'm always interested in new things. Like, I want to learn something new all the time. So when the computer first came out in 1980, MIT asked me to go up to learn about the computer. And I thought, wow, computers do art? Wow, that's interesting. I said, and I had just gotten married. I was 41. My husband had two girls. They were 11 and 15. And we were all living together. And I kept saying, MIT's up in
near Boston.
Yeah. And I said, I'm coming. Mm-hmm. I'll be there. And every 6 months, this very nice man, Peter Spackman, would call me and say, Barbara, are you coming? We have all these computers here, and they really want to meet you. And I said, yeah, I'm coming. But I thought, there must be a computer in New York. I mean, this is New York. I took 2 years to find a computer. 2 years. And somebody, because I wouldn't say hello, I would say, what do you know about computer art? Hello. Nice to meet you.
Also. Yeah.
Also. Yeah. So after 2 years, somebody said, oh, I know somebody who's interested. Time Incorporated has this little secret enclave called Time Video Information Services, TVIS, up on the 50th floor in the Time Life building. Why don't you go up there and meet some of the people? So I did. And first they thought maybe they would hire me. And I thought, no, I
do not want to be staff. Yeah.
But I wouldn't have said no. But I wasn't that excited about being hired. But I was excited when they said, why don't you come up at 5 o'clock at night to 9 in the morning and just do your work or whatever. Learn the computer. Here's the book. And I went at 5 o'clock, looked at the book, read what I needed to do. And the first thing I made was a car. The second thing I made was a turtle. I had 6 colors, 6 drawing modes, fill and non-fill. It was so primitive, but so exciting. And I would be there every night for a couple of years, and I created this body of work that, I wasn't allowed to say that I was up there because it was secret. I wasn't allowed to say that I was working up there.
I'm just one of the cleaning people.
Yeah. No, they knew. It was like a big room with lots of people at different desks, but nobody should know that we were working. This is like 1982 to 1984. And finally, they closed down. And then I was able to tell people, I'm working with computers. I could show them what I was doing. But and then I was vilified by my illustration friends because computers, what are you doing? Because I realize now, it was taking them out of their comfort zone.
Yeah.
And people thought that I would never work in my sketchbooks or do pen and ink or watercolor or oil
You'd
painting
gone over
again.
to the dark side.
That I would only be working with the computer. I think, why? I just added on to my repertoire of what I do. So when you say to me, how did my work evolve or change? I'm always interested in new things and learning new things. So everything that I touch always looks like mine. Like now recently, I decided to take pottery classes, ceramic classes at Greenwich Pottery House or something like that in 16 Jones Street in the Village here. And I created these shoes that you see here on my table. And I'm having the best time doing this because I'm learning something new. But clearly, they look like my work. And when I gave in 1970, whenever I did the V&A show, no, when was it? In 2013, I know I've been on the planet a long time. I get my years mixed up. In 2013, when I had the show at the V&A, they wanted my shoes. I had done two shoes in pottery, in ceramic. So one in 1973 and one in 1975, and they took those two shoes, which I was thrilled about. But now, in 2019, I was beginning to miss them, even though I was thrilled that they had it. And that's why I decided to take the ceramics class so I could make some shoes, so I could have some for myself.
We'll have pictures on the webpage for it.
I know. I love them. So,
are there other forms you still want to learn and work in?
Well, I never worked in wax and caustic. I never did that, but I don't know. I'm 80 right now, so I'm not sure whether I'm going to have time to work in wax and caustic. But I pretty much tried almost every medium. I love working in oil. I love working in watercolor. I love etching. I love lithography. I mean, there's really no medium that I don't mind, that I don't love working in if I take it on, and if it interests me.
Favorite, or is it really just contingent on what you're trying to make?
I don't have a favorite, but basically the things that I do in my sketchbook, the reason I love working in sketchbooks is because it's portable. I can take it anywhere I want. I have a pen, I have a book, I'm sitting in an office, I'm on the train, I'm on the bus, I'm waiting for somebody, my sketchbook comes out. It's always with me. So I would say if I had it's not my favorite, but if
it's
I
your most
had,
familiar.
Yeah, it's portable. And that's what makes it the thing that my go-to medium.
Does it ever make people uncomfortable? If you're on the subway or something and you take out a sketchbook, do other people start to look askance at you? Most everybody's on their phones
I don't
nowadays.
notice if they did. I'm too busy doing what I'm doing.
Yeah, I did one with Mort Gerberg, illustrator and cartoonist, who his challenge was, how quickly can I draw these people on the subway before they notice that I'm drawing them?
Right. Well, I'm not drawing people on the subway. I'm just drawing from my head.
Yeah.
So
we'll get to the sketchbooks, but I'm wondering, you talked about how limited the palette was with shapes and fills and everything else.
With the computer.
In the early days.
Yeah.
Now that you can do so much more, do you miss the limitations at all? Did the limitations help in terms of constraining? So you're shaking your head, which tells me I'm going up the wrong tree.
No, I don't miss anything.
Yeah.
I don't have a missing gene. I don't miss doing this or miss doing that. I just am on to the next thing and interested in what I'm doing at the moment.
Sure.
But I like what I did in the past. So, but I don't miss it. The only thing I missed was my shoes that I gave to the V&A.
And that's physically missing something. So
physically. Well, I thought, I think I would like to have some. And that's what prompted me to take this class at the Greenwich Street Pottery House. That's it.
Okay, I'll make sure it's in the website for the show. I was just wondering in those terms of, were the limitations back then actually beneficial, or, you were enough of an artist that I'll work within these constraints, but I'd really rather have more more tools with the computer back then?
I think that I am pretty much satisfied with what I'm given. Yeah. If I'm given a piece of paper, a scissor, 3 colors, oh, that's a challenge. I'm going to make something nice out of that. I feel like I can do art with anything, and I don't care how limiting it is, and I don't care how big it is. I'm fine with it all.
Yeah. That's what kills me, because I have no visual imagination whatsoever. So I live in envy. I know we talked about how envy isn't good, but the fact that I just can't do something like that in the slightest, it burns my ass. That's all I'm saying. So along those same lines, favorite era of your work, or do you just...
Favorite what?
Era. Was there a stretch that, I really loved what I was doing?
Of mine?
Yeah.
I don't have a favorite era.
You seem more satisfied than any artist I know. That's wonderful.
I know. Well, maybe, I don't know. I don't have a favorite era. I really look at my work as if somebody else did it. And I think, oh, I really like that. Or it doesn't matter where it is. And this, I try not to censor myself and think, that's horrible. I hate it. Yeah. If I do something and I really don't like it, like in my sketchbooks, I do something, I really don't like it, but I'm not allowed to tear out a page. I have to work I have rules. Yeah. I have to work page after page and book after book. And if I don't like something, it's too bad. I have to see it. So obviously not everything is my favorite thing. And there are some things that I've done that could be better. Job. But sometimes I look at the things that I have that and I look at it and go, oh, that's good. And it made a change in my work. I just didn't recognize that at one point I'd be doing some more of that in another book and liking it. And that was a clue that I was changing, but it was so different that I didn't recognize myself in that drawing, so I didn't like it. And then 5 years later, I liked it.
Incorporated it. Yeah.
That's interesting. And that was interesting to me as I worked through my sketchbooks. What I thought I didn't like, I liked later. So it was a confirmation for me that it was good that I never threw anything out that I didn't like. Mm-hmm. Because I think I've destroyed 2 or 3 things in my life. I ripped it up. Yeah. And now I'm kind of sorry that I ripped it up because I think I would have liked to have seen the things now that I didn't like. But,
or at least how they evolved into something else.
Yeah.
Do the sketchbooks, if you open one randomly, can you tell, oh, yeah, this was 1986?
Yes. Yes, I can. Because I was for the last 7 years, I've been archiving my work. Mm-hmm. I don't want to leave a mess. I don't know,
this place is very clean, so you're doing a great job.
I don't want to leave a mess for my family. I know that I know best what my work is, so I want to scan everything at 600 dpi. I want to take care of it. I want to put it in archival envelopes. That was my goal the last 7 years, besides doing my work. This is just, oh, by the way.
My legacy.
Yes, my legacy. I mean, I'm not going to live forever. I still like to salsa dance. Yeah. I'm not dying yet, but hey, I know that I'm not going to live forever. So what is going to happen to the work? And I'm kind of thinking about where my work is going. Where will it be in the future when I'm not here? Mm-hmm. And how well is it archived so that people who write about art will be able to access it clearly, in a way that makes sense to them.
Mm-hmm. But in a non-system mode, like if there was a copy of one of your sketchbooks and you weren't able to read on the spine, which one it was, and you just opened it, would you know?
Pretty much, because in the archiving, because we've
just
archived...
from the process of doing that, you became so familiar with that?
No, because when we're archiving, one of my assistants, when she has it up on the screen, I walk in and go, oh, that's 1986.
Oh, okay, good.
I can tell that. And then they have it really big because they're cleaning up really meticulously every page of my sketchbook as they scan it in at 600 dpi. And so when I see it blown up on the screen, it's like, oh, that looks really nice, because it's like kind of edited a piece. Oh, let me see the whole thing, like the whole page. Oh, yeah, I like that drawing. And I remember that. It's
out of the context of the physical book, too.
Right.
It becomes an art form, or artwork when it's on the screen.
It doesn't have anything to do with me anymore.
Yeah.
And that's, I don't really feel like my work has anything to do with me anymore when I see it. And I just look at it as if somebody else did it and think, oh, I like that.
Do you think that's a function of coming up in illustration, where your work is meant to be reproduced and pushed out there, as opposed to if you had gone fine art and this is me and my canvas? And
no, I don't know. I think that it's just...
partly, I think a lot of it is just who you are.
Yeah, I think it's just... I don't want to be judging what I'm doing and what the work is, because... I really feel like what I've been given is a gift, and I totally appreciate it. And I'm very, very thankful that I have the life that I have, that, I've been given this gift, and I almost feel like if I don't use it, I am sinning in some way. So I kind of have to do the work because I'm been given this gift, and that I have to give it out to other people. That's like what I feel.
What's your work routine like? What is your day like, basically? If you don't have a specific project going on?
And I don't really have any specific projects, because I haven't done illustration in a really long time, and I've been very fortunate to be able to just do my work and be able to... come in my studio at 9 o'clock in the morning or 10 o'clock in the morning and leave at 5. This is my day job. And then I go home at night. My schedule is just kind of getting up, having breakfast, coming down to my studio, enjoying my day, doing whatever I have to do, preparing for shows, seeing that the archive is being done well, just kind of organizing it. And then maybe I have some time to sit down and do some art. And a lot of times my assistant, Eva, she goes, "Did you do your list that I made for you? Have you called those people? Have you done this?" And I'd say, "No." She goes, "Well, you can't sit at your drawing table until you do that list." Because if I walk over to my drawing table, which you saw in the back, and I sit down, she turns around and said, "Did you finish everything on your list?" So, but I just come here and work and do whatever needs to be done in respond to shows or in respond to people or...
And then there's
And I like writing letters, and I like answering, letters. I'm old-fashioned that way. But email, too. I have a lot of emails.
Yeah, and we corresponded that way. I would love to get a letter from you someday with one of your crazily designed envelopes or something. I'll give you my address.
Because I'd love to do it.
It's very rare. I've held on to almost every piece of written correspondence I've received in the last 30 years. It's only a couple of bags that I have them in now. But
well, I'm going to be added to that.
Yeah, see, that I look forward to. I have one friend,
on my Moo card.
I have one friend who sends postcards, and I always look forward to just seeing his postcards. Terrible handwriting, but I get these postcards from my pal, and it's always nice to see someone went to that effort. It's not, he doesn't make his own. He's buying postcards, but it's still somebody wrote something. They put a stamp on it. They went somewhere instead of.
I love writing letters.
Yeah.
I love writing letters. In fact, I love buying stamps.
Yeah.
And that's another thing Eva said. How many stamps are you going to buy? It's like my mother.
I was going to say, she sounds like a replacement mom in a good way. But
No. She's great. I need somebody just like her to kind of keep me from being distracted. She goes, "I never met anyone who's so distracted like you." Because I could go up and think, oh, I have to do that. And then I get up and it leads me to another part of the studio. And I'll go, oh, let me finish this. Then I get up and go to another part of the studio. And I realized maybe about 30 years ago, how I actually work. Yeah. I don't sit and do one thing at one time and finish that one thing at one time. Maybe except in my sketchbooks if I'm home, because I have a little studio at home and I might, finish a bunch of drawings at one time. But basically, I do something here, a little thing, and that reminds me that I have to go to that corner of the room or part and do whatever I have to do, and then I have to go someplace else to finish this thing, and then I have to go here. And at the end of the day, all these little bits and pieces get finished, but I don't sit and do one thing at a time. I'm sort of like a random, distracted person.
The weird
and I
walk
guess
through that.
That's why I like to archive, and that's why I like to be so organized, because my core is very distractible. Yeah. I can get distracted very, very easily, kind of like in a daydream. Mm-hmm. And so if I'm really organized, that keeps me kind of focused.
At least it shows you that there's a pattern to it all, a system that it can all work in.
Yeah, but it's a little chaotic.
Yeah, as it should be.
Yeah, well, well, it is.
Yeah. With the sketchbooks, is one of your rules, do you go on to the next page before you have finished a drawing?
Oh, no.
Or do you have to finish the drawing before you go to the next one?
I finish the drawing, and then I go to the next page.
That's what I was
I work page after page.
I just wasn't sure if you go back and work on stuff. I know you take them out long-term afterwards, but...
Right. Sometimes I might go back and look at something, and put a collage here or draw an element there or whatever. But when I finish my work, it's done.
Yeah.
And then I'm on to the next page.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Having rules, again, keeps you from the distractibility thing also, I imagine, instead of going back and playing with old pages instead of just going forward and making something new. So, one thing I was wondering, especially your illustration work, it's very narrative in focus. And I know you had some intersection with cartoonists and that you did a couple of fumetti with Harvey Kurtzman.
Oh, I love Harvey Kurtzman.
I want to kill you because you actually knew Harvey.
Harvey, I love.
He's one of the greatest heroes of comics.
Love Harvey Kurtzman. Yeah. We spent on doing a fumetti. Well, doing the fumetti is one thing. This is in the 60s. And then we spent time together for Esquire magazine. We did kind of a shoot, and somehow Esquire magazine wanted me to be the script person on it. I didn't do any artwork. The only thing I did was go to different places, scout locations, and then meet the crew in California, and then go back to the locations that I scouted for them. So I spent 3 weeks with Harvey Kurtzman, and we had the best time. We got along so well, and the people who we met in California was a woman named Laura Jarre, Jarre, and she was a model actress, beautiful person, beautiful inside and out. And her man friend was Maurice Jarre. I don't know whether they were married at the time. I guess they were.
It'd be a weird coincidence to have the same name.
Yeah.
But go on.
No, but I don't know whether her name was. Maybe it was. Anyway, we all stayed at the Del Coronado Hotel. We started the shoot there, and then we went to, I think, the Camelback Mountain in,
I think it's Utah or Colorado or...
Colorado, yeah. I think. I don't know.
It sounds good.
Anyway, and then New Orleans, and then Florida, and then we disbanded. But that's where I spent that time with Harvey Kurtzman. So when you spend that kind of time together, you really, maybe it was Arizona, Camelback Mountain in Arizona. Yeah. You really get to know somebody. And Terry Stevenson, I don't know where he was. He was the only person that sort of didn't, we were all together and we all had a great time together, but when it expanded, I stayed in touch with Harvey and with Laura and with Maurice. but I didn't know where Terry Stevenson went. But that was a very special time with Harvey Kurtzman.
Had you ever thought about doing comics? I know now the concession here is you are very career driven and you actually earned money from your work, and comics is not a way to earn money doing work. But I had wondered, with the narrative impulse of your illustration and drawing, whether you'd ever thought about working in a panel by panel mode.
It never that. I just follow my instinct, and that was never one of my instincts.
And that's good. I take that as a positive, because comics are a great way to lose your mind and your money. So I'm glad you didn't pursue. But I was just wondering, given.
Well, if it went that way, I would have done it. But I don't force myself, or not even. It's not even a word to force myself. I don't go in directions. I don't look at other things and think, oh, maybe I want to do that. I follow my instinct to wherever it takes me, and I found that really serves me very well, to kind of go in my own direction, whatever that is, and not kind of get distracted.
Distracted, but in a limited way. You stay within the guardrails.
Yeah,
of
whatever.
distraction.
I don't know.
Now, did your family get to see much of your success? I know your mother died
pretty early. Yeah. My mother died in 1970. My father died in 1971. They were older parents. Yeah. I don't think they really should have had kids. My mother was a designer, a wonderful blouse designer in the 40s and 50s. And she smoked a lot, so she got emphysema. And in the 60s, she couldn't work really anymore. And she died in 1970. They saw my success because they saw I was happy. Yeah. And they never made me, they never said, you should get married. Because in 1960, when you graduated college, that's when I went to Pratt and I graduated in 1960, they didn't expect me to get married, even though I had a boyfriend and who I loved dearly. But when I didn't want to get married, that was a surprise to him. Mm-hmm. But even though I always said that I don't want to get married, I want a career. And I knew that I told my mother and father that I had to work at least 4 years before I even think about settling down with somebody. And by that time, it was 1960 to 1970, but they never bugged me about getting married. They saw I was happy. I was very good, in quotes.
You didn't get into trouble.
I didn't get into trouble. I did everything I was supposed to do. And so I didn't have that pressure. But they never really saw me happy now in my life. And also, the person that I married, the man that I married, I knew when I was 16. And he was my first real boyfriend.
Oh, really?
That I was really in love with. And then 20 years later, I met him again in the 70s, 75, and we got married in 1980. So maybe 74, we met him again. And they never saw that. Mm. And I think that, but my mother really liked him when we were 16 because we lived in the same building complex. So I know that they're up there very happy. Yeah,
they would have approved because he was pre-approved at 16.
They totally would have approved. And I know that it's a happy place. Yeah.
Now, it feels like, to an outside observer, that your mom's design background and entrepreneurialism really influenced you. Did your father's, from what I gathered from an interview I read of yours, worked for the Postal Service but was political in thinking? Did that affect you? Did his politics or political leanings also?
Well, they were very leftist.
Yeah.
And my father really didn't talk that much about politics. Yeah. Because they were so much older than me, of course they were older than me. They were my parents. but so much older parents. Yeah. They were, the fact that they were parents, I think, really kind of surprised them. They weren't like, what I would call normal parents. I don't know how to even explain it. When you really have parents, when you grow up in a building that has 88 apartments and everybody is kind of interconnected, and my dancing teacher was Marjorie Marshall, Penny Marshall's mother, and Ronnie Marshall was one of my good friends, and we grew up in a building that had a lot of different families and examples of how families were, but our family was very different than all the other families in the the thing. Like my mother was the only woman in the 88 apartments that went downtown to work.
Yeah.
And she was very sophisticated looking, she blonde hair, kind of piled up, very 1940s, and always had gloves and heels, and went down to the subway and clop, back from the subway. And my mother was besides Marjorie Marshall, my mother and another woman, Mrs. Lipkin, who worked with her husband in real estate, no woman really worked. That's why she wasn't, and they both weren't like really on me to get married, because their marriage was a little bit strained, I think, and I never heard them argue. I never heard anything like that. But, now looking back and being the age that I am and understanding what relationships are, they really had, I think they got married because everybody said you should be getting married. Yeah. Just like they didn't want to do that to me.
Yeah, they gave you that freedom they didn't have.
Right.
Yeah, do you go back to the Bronx? Does the Bronx mean anything to you as
I love
home?
The Bronx.
Yeah. I ask because I recorded 2 shows, one with Jerome Charin, another with Frederick Tutton, who grew up near each other in the Bronx, and they have both spent their lives weirdly dealing, and they came up in much more dire circumstances than you did. One never goes back. The other one never stops writing about it because he's trying to reconcile the Bronx of his childhood with his success as a writer nowadays. So, given that, I was wondering, if your Bronx is a little more pleasant than those guys.
It is.
So.
We had, our building was 3235 Grand Concourse, the last house on the Grand Concourse, and it intersected with Marshall Parkway, Jerome Avenue, and the end of the Grand Concourse. Like everything kind of intersected at that and our building. And I really feel I loved my childhood. I think that I was very fortunate to grow up in the building that I grew up in. And I remember when I was 14, I kneeled down in front of the window in my bedroom and said, "Dear God, thank you so much for making me be born in New York and not in Kansas." I remember that, and I'm thinking, how did I come up with that? Kansas, I didn't even see The Wizard of Oz until I was like 30. Yeah. So I don't even know how I came up with that, but I remember so distinctly being so grateful that I was born in New York City and not somewhere else, because I knew there was opportunity. I went to the High School of Art and Design. It was called Industrial Art when I was younger, I think 14, 15, 16. So I went downtown to school, and then I went to Pratt in Brooklyn, traveling 3 hours, an hour and a half each way, and 3 trains. Loved it. Yeah. Loved school. So I was very fortunate to have what I feel positive experiences in my early life.
Did it all mean New York to you, or was Manhattan a separate thing? Was it anything you perceived as, Manhattan is different than the rest of New York, or was it all was it all your city, essentially?
Yeah, I think it's all my city. I think that every borough has its distinct feeling. I had friends in Queens, and I liked that, and I had some friends in Brooklyn. I always managed to find. I used to love to go Latin dancing when I was, probably 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. I used to like to go to the Palladium on Wednesday nights and dance. And a lot of the guys that I met lived in Brooklyn. And if we dated, they would have to come all the way up to the Bronx to pick me up, because that was the rule, and then bring me back. So I think that all the boroughs had their own little, and still do, their own little distinctive feel to it.
Yeah, do you have a favorite New York? Either favorite time in New York?
Like right now is my favorite time.
Yeah. And favorite neighborhood?
Huh?
Favorite neighborhood?
Favorite neighborhood. Well, I like where I live, which is 84th Street and East End Avenue. And I love where my studio is, which is
insane.
Morton Street
it is
and
absolutely
the
gorgeous
Hudson River.
Yeah.
And I think these are my two favorite places. Mm-hmm. I love Central Park. I'm just happy I'm here.
Yeah. Talk about dance.
Who?
Dance.
Dance.
Yeah, how did it start for you? And did dance influence the line?
Yeah, I think that my work has a lot of rhythm in it.
Yeah.
And I learned how to dance in high school. Because we went to the High School of Industrial Art, it used to be used as a hospital in the Civil War. The hospital in the Civil War had no gym.
Yeah.
So in order to give us the recreation that high schools require, and this is 1954, they used to have lunchtime dancing. And there was this one woman this is where I learned how to dance. One woman, Helen Majak, and I loved the way she danced. I couldn't dance at all. Yeah. And I would look at her, and then go and try and mimic her, and then run on the subway, listen to a half hour of a Latin music station called Dick Ricardo Sugar, and try and be Helen Majak. And one day I got it. I was Helen Majak. And it was like, oh, I learned how to dance. And I have to thank Helen for that.
Yeah. Did you stay in touch with her?
No.
Had any idea who she was?
She was a year older than me.
Okay.
So, the years then, a year older is like...
It's a huge gap
I'm
when
a kid.
You're a school kid.
Yeah.
And from what I was reading in An Artful Life, you are also the dancing conduit for all of these illustrators and artists who had, I'm assuming, two left feet, but, did they really...
Well, what happened was when 1960, when I first got out of school, I won a prize at the Society of Illustrators for some monotype etchings that I did. And somehow that just brought me into Milton Glaser, Seymour Quast, Bob Weaver, Tom Allen, Tomi Ungara. So for a period of time, right after I got out of school, I was dating Bob Weaver, who was actually a teacher of mine in my senior year, but I didn't go out with him in the senior year. But when I would bring my portfolio around after I graduated, I would meet him in the street all the time. I think, oh, then he invited me to come to a party at his house. So I went to a party at his house, and the party was just him and me. So after about...
Surprise!
After about, an hour and a half, since it was just him and me, I said, is this the party? Is it just you and me? He said, well, yes, it's just you and me. And so somehow we kind of got together, and he was very nice. I really liked him. And his friends were Tomi Ungara, and Tomi Ungara is married to a woman named Miriam, and Tom Allen was married to a woman named Pat. And every weekend, they would all congregate in he was in Little West 12th Street. He owned a brownstone, or Grace, I don't know what. And his studio was above, and the main floor was where we would have a party. And they knew that I liked to dance. And the twist was very, very, Chubby Checker was very popular at the time, and the twist was all the rage. And so I would teach everyone how to do the twist, and also Milton Glaser and that whole little crowd too. everybody wanted to know how to do the twist. So I was the liaison because I love to dance.
And you kept at it for
I love
through
music.
Today.
I love Latin music. I love all music, and I hear Latin music, and it just makes my heart sing.
Do you have music on when you're working?
I used to.
Yeah.
I used to listen to music and work. Now I like silence. My studio is very silent. We're 3 people in the studio, very little talking. We're all working, and I love it. It's very zen.
Yeah. What sort of work do the assistants do? I mean, you mentioned their involvement in the archiving project.
And that's a big deal.
Yeah.
I mean, because every single piece of work is scanned and cleaned up and done. That part of it is kind of really done now after 7 years. So, I don't know, there's always something to do.
Yeah. I just mean it's not like the Jeff Koons thing with, I don't make the art, I give that to my assistants to make.
Oh, no, I make the art.
Yeah, that's what I'm
no, my studio assistants don't do any art.
Yeah, when the first time I heard that from Koons, I was like, nah, that's...
Well, that's another kind of thing. I don't know.
Right,
I mean, he seems to be successful.
Yeah, if you can sell something for $90 million, you'll be ecstatic. But
he's a good salesman, and hey, I don't know.
I know. I went to that big, it was the one they closed the old Whitney where they had a Jeff Koons retrospective 4 or 5 years ago. And I thought, I'm in the city. Let me see it. Maybe it'll actually do something for me. No, it's still.
It's not my thing, but, it's other
It just feels like a
lot
prank.
of people like it. And,
I'm down. It just feels like a prank that's being pulled on people, but whatever. That's
time will tell.
Yeah.
And, who knows who's going to surface in the future.
Yeah, you taught for almost 40 years.
Yeah, I love teaching.
Yeah, what did teaching teach you? Like, what did you have to figure out in becoming a teacher, and what did you get better at over the decades?
Well, I started teaching in 1967 at SVA, School of Visual Arts. And the reason I got the job is there was this man who was a classmate. Well, it wasn't in my class, but he was in my year, and his name is Bob Giraldi. And Bob was teaching there, and he was head of the department at the time. And he wanted to hire me. There was one other woman there. I didn't know that, but I never thought of myself as a woman.
A female.
A female who I never even knew there was an issue. So I only knew this later, but when I was just doing my work and doing my thing. So he asked me to teach in his department, and so I really wanted to. And Silas Rhodes said, she can't teach in our department, or she can't teach in our school because look at her. Look where 1967. Her skirts, they're too short. Her hair is too long. This is what Bob told me, or someone told me this. And we can't have her. So Bob, as the story goes, said, well, Silas, if I can't hire her, I don't want to be here anymore. Silas said, okay.
Only because it's you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I started teaching drawing in SVA in 1967. And when I first walked into the class, I thought, now what am I going to do? I didn't have a plan.
That's what I was wondering.
Because it's drawing, and drawing. I know how to draw, and hopefully they know how to draw, and they're going to like to draw. So I thought, I'm walking the class, I go, now what? I think I'll take attendance. So I took attendance, and that kind of broke the ice, and I kind of got to ask everyone what they expected out of the class. So that started a conversation. And I never, when I teach, or when I did teach, I never lectured to people. I always kind of engaged. It was a two-way conversation. Okay, what do you expect to get from the class? So if everybody tells me what they expect to get from this class of drawing, well, by the time 25 people say something, and they talk for about 2 or 3 minutes, you're already in the class. So then the model poses, and then we start drawing, and I would go around to each person and look at their work and never put my hand on it, but say what I felt looking at the model, looking at what they were looking at, and saying where I felt it needed adjustment, how it could be better. And that was my style of teaching. Then I moved into teaching illustration. And, that class was very, very, very popular. And everybody loved it. And the next year, everybody wanted to take my class. And so I had 2 classes. And then the third year, I had 3 classes. And I couldn't teach more than 3 classes. So one of the classes was illustration. And how I decided to do the illustration class is that I would give an assignment, and it would be make yellow the darkest, deepest color in the on the page. Something like that. Something really kind of like, oh, how can I do that? They'd really have to think about it. Yeah. And everybody would do something. It was 2 weeks. Like the first week I would give the assignment, and then as I gave the assignment, before I gave the assignment, I would ask everybody I would say a word like shoes, and everybody had to say something. Write down the first thing that came to their mind when I said shoes. Then I would say moon, and everybody had to write down the first things that came to their mind. I'd say another word, and then at the end of that, I would make everybody read their lists to everybody, and I would say to the class, picture. Every time somebody says down their list, start picturing something. Everything is a picture. Start thinking about it. So every time everybody went and said their list, and then I would give the assignment, whatever the assignment was. And I would ask them to write something down about the assignment. So when they left the class, they would already have kind of pictures in their head, something written down that they could use as the basis for starting to work. And then they would come in for sketches, and I would look at all the sketches and ask people to choose. One person would have to volunteer and choose a piece on the wall, and then that piece that they chose would be the next person who had to talk about it. Mm-hmm. So everybody had to talk about their piece, and everybody had to engage. So it wasn't like me standing up there and talking to the student. We were all kind of engaged in it. And that's how I taught. And I loved it. The 3 hours went like that. And then we had the sketch for the first week, and then the finish for the second week, and that went the same way. And it was kind of like a round robin. I never chose the artist. And basically, when everything was on the wall, the best things got talked about first, not by my choice, but by the class's choice. And the pieces that were least interesting were left. But I would always say something after everybody made their statement.
Yeah. Did you have that first instance of seeing a student really succeed professionally?
Say that again?
Do you remember the first time, like, one of your students had a good commercial success? How they either, sold fine art or made a break in the illustration world? Did you ever have that sense of pride at seeing, one of your students?
Well, I think that everybody, who made their way in the illustration world, I don't really know, because I had kept up with a few students, but not that many. That's
what I wasn't sure, if any of them came back and said, it's thanks to you I was,
A lot of people have said, positive things about my teaching. I don't know. I'm friends with some people who I taught over the years, but I'm very busy myself, so I haven't really kept in touch with a lot of people. And also, I'm glad when people are very successful. I'm thrilled.
Given that it can be a competitive space, it's great that, you can just be happy at someone else's success and, be willing to share some of that, I guess.
Yeah. I'm happy when somebody's successful. I really am. I feel good because that means there's another happy person out there enjoying their lives.
A question from a guy who is not he hasn't been a guest on the show yet, but I've known him for, since 1995, just because of a weird set of circumstances that I'll tell you about off mic. Gary Panter. I emailed Gary to say, I'm recording with Barbara tomorrow. Anything? All he wrote back was, ask her about 1965. I have no idea what that's in reference to, and I hope it's not something terribly embarrassing.
No, not at all.
Anything you can share?
Yeah, I get this phone call from someone. Hi, this is Gary Panter. Okay, I didn't know who he was. I mean, he was in school or just out of school.
Yeah.
He said, I love your work and I would love to come and see you. I said, okay.
Sure.
Okay, come on. And he came to my apartment, and we had this great conversation, and we really got along, and that's how I met Gary Panter. I think he's wonderful. I love his work. I love everything about him. And 1965.
Okay, so I'm glad there's not something scandalous or terrible around it. So, my Gary Panter.
He's a wonderful artist, and he's a very nice man.
Yeah, I met him over at the Javits Center in 1995 when I was working on a business magazine. It was the licensing fair, and I did all the interviews I was supposed to do during the fair, and then I just went walking around through all the exhibitors, and I saw Gary Panter LLC, his company, little booth. I freaked out because I loved Gary's comics and his paintings, and I just say, holy shit, Gary Panter. And he looks like I'm about to serve him with a subpoena or something. And we ended up spending hours together just talking that day. The next day, this is a long story. During that day, we talked about how Marvel Comics was reprinting these old 1950s monster and horror comics by Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko and Basil Wolverton, all these guys who Gary loved. I said, I'll be back tomorrow at the fair. I can bring those with me. And I brought them the next day, and he thanked me profusely, and he signed his copy of Jimbo, his big comic, for me.
Right.
And then he says to me, I have this pathological thing about the post office, so it might take me a while to get these back to you, Gil. Now, I was 24 years old, and this is the first real artist I've ever met, so I just figured, okay, that's what artists are like, whatever. I'll Months go by, and this envelope shows up one Saturday morning, and it's from Gary. It's got the comics inside, big manila envelope, and it's totally covered with drawings from the comics themselves that Gary did. And I thought, oh, that's what took him so long. He was doing this. Decades go by. 25 years later, I meet him at a museum, and he's like, oh, yeah, I see that envelope every so often when I Google myself, because I scanned it and I put it online, because this is a great piece of art from an artist. And he says to me, yeah, the line at the post office was so long that day. And I said, you drew all those while you were standing on line from memory, because they were already in the envelope, right? He's like, yeah. I was like, that's because you're a genius and I'm some schlub from New Jersey. And he was bashful about it, but deep down, I think he knows he's a really good artist, and that's what you do. But that is my Gary Panter story. The first time I met him, he was just so, easy to talk to some guy who, some 25-year-old fanboy who shows up in a weird place where he's trying to do business.
No, he's very nice man. I mean, I find that most of the people who I've met in the illustration field and most artists are very nice and very congenial and very, I don't know, I haven't had a bad experience.
Good.
I feel lucky.
And you teach him to dance. That's good.
Huh?
You teach him to dance, so that's good.
Now, I haven't taught anybody to dance lately. I don't know if anybody wants to learn how to dance.
I'd say we could start lessons.
Say hello. Oh, especially if you know how to dance. Yeah. There's Sunset Salsa out here on the pier on Christopher Street, where I'll be.
As
and
you
it's
should.
this summer. I don't know exactly when. I think July and August.
Does your husband dance?
No. And he doesn't mind that I dance with other people.
Do you mind that he doesn't? That's
no, I don't
okay,
mind.
Because my wife likes to dance and doesn't like the fact that I don't dance. And I was recently at a business dinner where a Chinese businessman who insisted, you must take ballroom dancing lessons, you and your wife. And she was like, yeah, you really should, Gil. And so we'll see if he browbeats us into taking up dance. I'll let you know if that happens, so you can at least...
I just feel everybody should do what they do best and what they want to do, just as long as don't stop me from dancing. Right. You don't want to dance? I'm perfectly fine with that. Yeah. But if I want to go dancing with my dancing partner, Antonio, I want to be able to have a great time. And he's totally happy with me going out and having a great time. That's why we get along.
Yeah. It's necessary. So... besides the shoes that you're making now, are there other projects you haven't gotten to yet, or projects you're working on in future that differ from?
This is up to the minute.
Yeah.
I mean, this is hot off the press.
I was going to say the steam coming off of them.
The shoes are hot off the press, and the rug people that I have inside with the balloons and everything, hot off the press. Yeah. I mean. I have no idea what I'm going to do next, but I'm still working on the shoes. Mm-hmm. I go every Tuesday when my class from 10 to 1, and usually I stay till 5, and I have to work really... I have 2 more classes that I'm going to be there for, but my husband and I are taking a trip for our 80th birthday around the British Isles, and ending up in Dublin, going to London, and then kind of taking a car. And I would love to see Stonehenge. Yeah. I have never seen it.
I've never been.
And I really would love to see it. So, and there are other places in England that I might like to see. So that's what.
And you could be there right around the solstice. Stonehenge. It's going to be mid-June, or the summer solstice will be just around
the summer
then.
Solstice,
Yeah, which could mean that Stonehenge is totally crowded. But
thank you for that, because I didn't really. Maybe very crowded, but at least I'll be there and I'll see it. Yeah. That's the next thing that I'm doing.
You're an inspiration. I find you very inspiring.
Thank you.
Did you ever feel like a trailblazer?
No.
In your life, you always just felt you were doing
my thing.
Yeah.
Whatever it was, whatever it is. Yeah. I never really tried to be a trailblazer.
Yeah. It just
But, if something interests me, I want to do it. But I don't want somebody to tell me I can't do it. I want to go forward, and I think I've been pretty lucky doing what I want to do when I want to do it. According to reason.
Yeah. I feel like we should have talked about the computer stuff more, but on the other hand, I think you've done enough interviews about the early computer work.
The computer stuff. When I started doing the computer stuff, it was very new, and I was learning something new, and I love learning things. I love new things. I'm curious. Yeah. So if somebody says something, would you like to do computer art or work on a computer? Have to think about that. I don't know. Yeah. I never saw a computer. I thought computers were for your telephone bill. Yeah. I don't know, something like that. I never thought of computers and art. So now computers are ubiquitous. I mean, obviously you can't live without it, and it's incorporated in all the art. But then in 1982, 84, 86. It took a long time for people to get into using the computer. I would say that, but if you didn't know computers by 1992, that late, because I got involved in 1982 when I first started looking, so 10 years, then you were out.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like you resisted, and then it was too late. You couldn't kind of get into it, or you had to hire somebody to help you with it, and it wasn't like a natural thing. And by then, like, I don't use computers that often anymore, except to do email and things of that nature. But I could if it was part of the art that I was doing. And like in 1991, I had a show at a gallery in Soho. It was just when Soho was just coming up, called Rempire. And it was called RAM, Random Access Memories, because there's RAM and there's ROM, Read Only Memory ROM, RAM, Random Access Memories. So Random Access Memories was the show that I had. And I came up with this hanging system, which was paper steel, stapled against the wall in strips that I made in strips and sewed them together with dental floss, and magnets on the back of these paper printouts that were mounted on gator foam, very sturdy, and put on the wall like I showed you in there. So clipped right on the wall. And I had a show in this gallery, and I have to show you these books that I came up with. Because I love sketchbooks, I had to figure out a way to let people understand why computers really interest me. And I came up with this idea of printing out, a friend of mine, because I was involved with computers all this time, I met this man called Tony Longson. And Tony invited me to California to be a teacher's artist in residence for a week in, I think it was Humboldt, California. And during that week, I came up with this idea that I wanted to do a book, or I wanted to do a computer program. And I spoke to Tony about it, and he wrote the program. And it was taking my sketches of 200 drawings in memory. I'm not saying the right word, but I can't think of it right now. And so randomly, the 200 drawings that were in the computer, he wrote a program that randomly accessed drawings. You, as the person the viewer, would choose a flag to put on the cover of it. And that was the only thing you could choose. And then it would randomly access and print 16 drawings on plus your flag. And then I had instructions of how to make a book. And people would come into the gallery. I would give there was like a U-shaped thing. They would be two computers, and you would choose the flag, and then you would wait for it to come out of the laser printer, and then you would go to the other side, and there'd be a cutting machine that you couldn't hurt yourself on, not a guillotine, but one like that. And then they got a piece that was instructing how to make a book, and then they made a book, and they came out with an original work of art. Each work, having the same book twice, it's 48 million to 1 if you get the same book twice. You will never get the same book twice. And each book is a unique work of art. And that came out of the computer, and that was in 1991. So random access memories, it randomly accessed all these drawings. So it doesn't matter which one you look at. And if you look at the American flag or the Canadian flag or China, Canada,
I see. These are
Britain, Mexico, Germany, France, Saudi Arabia. So you could choose the flag, but that would be the only thing that you could choose. And then the paper was pre-colored, and with the instructions, they came away with a free work of art. A lot of people still tell me, I have my book. I have my book. And I say, good, because that's an artwork.
Yeah, do you ever sign them for people? Do they show up asking for a little autograph?
Yeah, and they're all numbered. Every book has a unique number.
Yeah.
And Tony Longson wrote the program. And this recently, I asked Tony to, I couldn't do this now because that was 1991, but that computer doesn't exist and the program doesn't exist and nothing exists anymore. But he wrote me a program again, and I have it. I can do it at my next show if I want to. Which may be in 2020 at a gallery called Burning in Water Gallery.
Where is that located?
And that's at 515 West 29th Street, 515 West 29th Street, and it'll be sometime in 2020. And maybe I might have the book there. I don't know. Well, we haven't decided what was going to be in the show yet. I think it's going to be of the 70s. So maybe this book won't be in it because this is the 90s.
Well, you could do one based on the sketchbook drawings from the 70s.
Well, that's what all these drawings are up on the wall. They're all the 70s drawings from the 70s sketchbooks.
Yeah. You got a lot to look forward to, Barbara. I'll let you get back to it. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Well, thank you for having me, and it was a pleasure meeting you, really.
Thanks. And that was Barbara Nessim. I hope you got the vibe from this that she's not only a really great artist, but a fine human being. It was a really delightful conversation, and I'm so glad JJ put us together. You should check out her site, barbaranessim.com, to see more of her work, other interviews she's done, a more extensive bio, and a lot of other materials. And that's BARBARANESSIM.com. She's also on Instagram as Barbara Nessim, all one word, spelled the same way. You should definitely pick up that the Victoria and Albert Museum book about her work, published by Abrams, Barbara Nessim, An Artful Life. It's amazing to read. It's the essays are great, the artwork, the reproductions are phenomenal. I found my copy on Amazon. Just see where you can get yours. Also, when I mentioned that Barbara gave me a really nice gift afterwards, it was a reproduction of one of her sketchbook volumes, and I was just kind of floored that she gave me one of those and inscribed it. It is now on the route where I will grab stuff from the house in case of a fire. You don't need to know where everything is, but those are the few things that are important / irreplaceable in my life. But yeah, I was just kind of floored when she gave me that. So thanks again to JJ Settlemeyer for connecting us, and thank you, Barbara, for all the time. And after we wrapped, I asked Barbara, so who have you been reading? If you want to hear her answer to that, and get a little more conversation from us, you'll need to become a supporter of the Virtual Memories show so you can get access to our quarterly bonus podcast, Fear of a Square Planet. I'll get started on the second quarter 2019 episode next week, but the first quarter episode features book recommendations and some extra conversation with Jerome Charan, Peter Cooper, Edmund White, Eva Hagberg, Mort Gerberg, James Osland, Joe Chardello, James Sturm, Martin Hageland, Bram Presser, and Nathan Englander. You can support the Virtual Memories show via patreon.com/VMSpod or paypal.me/VMSpod, and that'll get you a link to the bonus podcast. There are all sorts of other goals and goodies in place for patrons, including a patron-only blog, handwritten show notes for every episode, secret project, the occasional query, and more. So go to patreon.com/VMSpod and support the art of fine conversation. Now, I recorded this one at Barbara's studio in Lower Manhattan. She had a parking space reserved for me, so I braved driving all the way downtown instead of parking up on 96th Street and taking the subway like I usually do. That meant I just paid the $15 or so at the George Washington Bridge, and that was it. Now, if you want to help defray some of the costs of the Virtual Memories show, like web hosting, travel, equipment, coffee, or just toss me some money because you think the show is worth it, then visit patreon.com/VMSpod or paypal.me/VMSpod and make a one-time or recurring donation. The special thanks go out to Nick Bartosik, Michael Hacker, Michael Janisic, Fred Kish, Jonathan Kranz, Kevin Katila, Jack Lescamella, Teresa Lewis, Stephen Nadler, Jim Ottaviani, Payne Prophet, Dmitry Samarov, Buzz Sawyer, Stephen Solomon, Greg Tanner, Ford Thomas, and Garrett Zecker for going over and above in their support of the Virtual Memories show. We have the full list of show supporters at chimeraobscura.com/VM. Our music for this episode is Fella by Hal Mayforth, used with permission from the artist. You can check out my episode with Hal from the summer of 2018, find out more about his art, and listen to his music, which is also available at soundcloud.com/Mayforth, and that's MAY4TH. And that's it for this week's episode of the Virtual Memories Show. Thanks so much for listening. We'll be back next week with cartoonist Carl Stevens. You can subscribe to the Virtual Memories Show and download past episodes at the iTunes Store. You can also find all our episodes and get on our email list at either of our websites, vmspod.com or chimeraobscura.com/VM. You can also follow the Virtual Memories Show on Twitter and Instagram at VMSpod, at virtualmemoriespodcast.tumblr.com, and on YouTube, Spotify, and TuneIn.com by searching for Virtual Memories Show. And if you like this podcast, please tell your pals, talk it up on social media, and go to iTunes, look up the Virtual Memories Show, and leave a rating and maybe even a review for us. It all goes to helping us build a bigger audience. Now, you've been listening to the Virtual Memories Show. I'm your host, Gil Roth. Keep reading, keep making art, and keep the conversation going.